74 verbal acquisition of 12 month. Range average is months.
So every customer today, I serve
RH,
30.
an 81-year-old widow.
Tanisha Renée Bowman kept her own records of every theft, the account numbers, the amounts, the dates, written in her own handwriting in a spiral notebook she hid in her kitchen. That notebook is the reason she's being handcuffed right now.
What a 17-year family.
I am not saying any else. The individual transacts someone from age present.
It would all come down to a spiral notebook. 99 cents from a Dollar Tree 2 blocks from her apartment. College ruled, soft cover, the kind a teenager might use for algebra homework. Inside it, in her own handwriting, 38 account numbers, $38 amounts, 38 dates. Every single column matched a transaction the bank had already flagged. The woman in this footage had been keeping her own records of the thefts. 211 unauthorized transactions, 14 elderly account holders, $94,200 stolen across 19 months, and a handwritten ledger that turned what could have been a he said she said dispute into a federal-grade paper trail her own defense attorney would not be able to explain. Quick question before we keep going. How many people have access to your bank account right now? Not the family you authorized. The strangers whose job lets them see your balance, your address, your social security deposit dates. Drop a number in the comments. And if you're new to the channel, subscribe. We cover cases like this every single week, and the next one is already in the works. Tanisha Renée Bowman was born in Crestfield, Ohio, on March 14, 1989, at Harland County Memorial Hospital. Her mother, Deborah Bowman, had worked the second shift housekeeping rotation at that same hospital for 19 years before Tanisha was born, and would work there for another 11 years after. Her father, Marcus Bowman, drove a regional freight route for a logistics company headquartered in Toledo. He was on the road 3 to 4 nights a week. The household ran on Deborah's overtime, a strict bedtime, and a non-negotiable rule that homework was finished before any television came on. Crestfield is a small township in Harland County, population just under 12,000. One main street, 2 stoplights, a feed store, a Family Dollar, a Marathon gas station, and a community bank that had been on Dunmore Avenue since 1962. The kind of town where the same families had been depositing checks at the same teller window for 3 generations. Tanisha grew up in a 2-bedroom rental on Vernon Street, the older of 2 children. Her younger brother, Andre, was 4 years behind her in school. By every teacher's account, Tanisha was a careful child, quiet, watchful, the kind of student who color-coded her notebooks before the first week of 4th grade was over, and who alphabetized the books on her side of the shared bedroom. Because, she told her mother, she didn't like not being able to find what she needed. At Crestfield Central Middle School, she joined the math team in 7th grade and stayed on it through her senior year of high school. She was not the fastest competitor. She was the most accurate. Her 7th grade math coach, Mr. Holloway, wrote in her end-of-year evaluation that she rarely showed her work but was almost never wrong, and that she had a strong aptitude for sequential problem-solving. Her 9th grade algebra teacher used the phrase meticulous to the point of slowness. Her 11th grade accounting elective teacher, a man named Vernon Pratt, who had spent 20 years at a regional CPA firm before going into teaching, wrote that she was the only student I have had in 14 years of teaching who balanced a practice ledger to the penny on the first attempt. Tanisha graduated from Crestfield Central High School in June 2007, finishing in the top 20% of a class of 143 students. She had wanted to attend Ohio State and pursue a 4-year accounting degree. The family could not absorb the tuition without taking on student debt, and her mother had a hard rule about debt. Deborah Bowman had grown up watching her own mother lose a small farm to a second mortgage, and she had told both her children, repeatedly, that she would rather they work 3 years longer than borrow $3,000 more. Instead, Tanisha enrolled at Harland County Community College in the fall of 2007 and pursued a 2-year associate degree in business administration. She paid for it herself. She worked nights and weekends at a Family Dollar on Route 21, restocking shelves until 11 on weekdays and running a register on Saturdays. In 2008, she transferred to a Sherwin-Williams paint counter on the highway because the pay was 25 cents an hour better, and the manager would let her swap shifts when final exam week came around. She finished her associate degree in May 2009, walked across a folding chair commencement stage in the community college gymnasium, and started looking for a job that did not involve a cash register and a name badge. The recession was 8 months old. She applied to 17 positions in 3 months and got 2 callbacks. The second callback was Hartwell Savings. Hartwell hired her in March 2010 as a part-time teller, starting wage $11.75 an hour. Her first day, she was issued the Hartwell-branded polo, a clip-on nameplate that read Tanisha B, and a teller drawer assignment at the second window from the left. Her training officer was Patricia Ellis, a woman who had been with the bank for 22 years and would later, during the investigation, describe Tanisha as the best new hire I trained in my entire career. Patricia's 90-day evaluation of Tanisha read, detail-oriented to the point of meticulousness, balances her drawer to the penny every single day of training without exception, demonstrates a natural ease with older customers that cannot be taught. Within 14 months, Tanisha was promoted from part-time to full-time. Her hourly wage went up to $14.10. In April 2014, she was promoted again, this time to senior teller, with override authority on transactions up to $1,500 and direct supervisory responsibilities for new hires. By 2017, she had been named Employee of the Quarter twice. Her annual salary had reached $41,000. Her performance reviews used phrases like consistently reliable, exceeds expectations on customer interaction, demonstrates excellent judgment under pressure, and, in one memorable review from her branch manager, the person I trust most on the floor when I am not there. In 2018, she moved out of her mother's spare bedroom, where she had been living rent-free since community college, and rented a 1-bedroom apartment in the Maplewood complex on the north edge of town. $540 a month, a small balcony overlooking the parking lot, a galley kitchen, a reserved spot under a carport. By every external measure, Tanisha Bowman had built the kind of small, careful, stable life her mother had hoped for her. She drove a 2015 Honda Civic she had bought used in cash. She paid her car insurance and her electric bill on time. She sent her mother $200 every month toward groceries, even after Deborah told her she didn't need to. She took her grandmother, who lived in an assisted living facility 40 minutes south in Pinehurst, out to lunch every other Saturday at a Bob Evans off the interstate. The customers at Hartwell Savings asked for her by name. Mrs. Henley asked for her. Mr. Carmichael asked for her. The Hudson sisters, who came in together every other Tuesday, asked for her. The retired schoolteacher who still cashed her pension check in person every month because she didn't trust direct deposit asked for her. That was the system Tanisha Bowman would eventually exploit. Hartwell Savings opened its doors on Dunmore Avenue in November 1962 as a depositor-owned thrift institution. For 38 years, it operated independently. In 2000, it was absorbed into Harland Midwest Bancorp, a regional bank holding company headquartered in Columbus that owned 11 community bank branches scattered across central and southern Ohio. The Crestfield branch served, as of 2023, roughly 4,000 active account holders. Of those, more than 60% were over the age of 65. More than 30% were over the age of 75. The branch's customer base reflected the township itself: older, rural, slow to embrace digital banking, deeply skeptical of anything that involved typing a password into a phone. The branch operated under what Harland Midwest called a community banking service model. Translation: most customers were known to the staff by name, most transactions were handled in person at the counter, and most account holders received their statements on paper, by mail, on the 15th of every month. A standard teller transaction at Hartwell required 2 layers of verification. The first was the account holder's signature, photo identification, or, for known customers, visual recognition by the teller. The second was a system-level entry in the branch's transaction software that recorded the method of verification used. The available verification codes were straightforward: customer present with signature, customer present with verbal authorization, telephone verified with security questions, and supervisor override for unusual cases. For cash withdrawals above $2,000, the system required a second teller or supervisor to physically log in and confirm the transaction at the same terminal, a dual verification step that had been added in 2019 after a fraud incident at one of the company's other branches near Dayton. For cash withdrawals below $2,000, no dual verification was required. The teller selected a verification code from a drop-down menu and clicked Submit. That was the vulnerability. The customer present, verbal authorized code was meant for situations where the account holder was physically present at the counter but had forgotten to bring identification, a longtime customer the teller recognized on site, an elderly customer whose hands shook too much to manage a signature, a regular whose face the staff knew better than their own paperwork. It was a code built on trust. It assumed that a teller would only select it when an account holder was actually standing in front of them, and there was nothing in the system, at the terminal level, that could verify whether that assumption was true. The other piece of the vulnerability lived inside the mailing cycle module. Every customer account had a paper statement preference and an associated mailing address. The mailing cycle was managed by the branch's back-office staff and could be adjusted by any teller with senior credentials. The original purpose of the adjustment field was administrative, to update an address when a customer moved or to pause statements when a customer requested it. But the field could also be used to push the mailing date forward by weeks or to suppress a specific monthly cycle altogether. The paper statement was the only way most of these elderly customers ever saw their account activity. They did not check balances online. They did not use mobile apps. They sat at their kitchen tables on the 18th or 19th of every month, opened the envelope from Hartwell Savings, and read what was inside. Delay the statement, and you delayed the discovery. The first unauthorized transaction Tanisha Bowman processed was on February 12, 2022, at 10:47 a.m. The customer was R.H., an 81-year-old widow who lived alone in a small white-clapboard house on Greenfield Road, 6 minutes from the bank. R.H. had been a Hartwell Savings customer since 1971. She had 3 accounts at the branch, a checking account funded almost entirely by her Social Security deposit, and a small monthly pension from the school district where her late husband had been a custodian for 31 years, a passbook savings account with a balance of just over $43,000, and a certificate of deposit that had been rolling over annually since 1994. That morning, R.H. was not in the branch. Tanisha pulled up R.H.'s checking account at the teller terminal at her second window, processed a cash withdrawal in the amount of $300, selected Customer Present, Verbal Authorized from the verification drop-down, and clicked Submit. She removed $300 in 20s from her drawer. She placed them in her own purse, in the small zippered pocket where she kept her tip money from the occasional bartending shifts she still picked up on weekends at a roadhouse off Route 21. The transaction took 41 seconds. No one noticed. The branch's surveillance camera, mounted in the corner above the lobby doors, captured the entire transaction. The footage showed Tanisha at her terminal, alone at the counter, counting bills out of her drawer with no customer in front of her. The camera had been there since 2014. The footage was retained for 45 days before being overwritten unless flagged. No one flagged it. 4 days later, on February 16th, Tanisha processed a second unauthorized withdrawal, this time $500, against R.H.'s checking account. Same verification code, same 41-second window, same routine. The pattern, once it started, was clinical. She targeted accounts that fit a specific profile. The customer had to be elderly, preferably over 75. The customer had to have a high balance, typically above $20,000 in available funds. The customer had to be a paper statement user with no registered online access. The customer had to be a known regular whose face Tanisha could place, whose mailing address she had memorized, whose schedule she could anticipate. She also looked for one more thing: the absence of a nearby family member. Customers who lived alone, whose adult children had moved out of state, whose only regular visitor was a home health aide twice a week. Those were the customers she focused on. She never took more than $1,400 in a single transaction. Most withdrawals were between $400 and $900. Anything below the dual verification threshold of $2,000. Anything that wouldn't trigger a supervisor walkover. She timed every transaction to the branch's rhythm. The branch manager, Eldon Ricks, took his coffee break at 10:15 a.m. and was typically gone from the floor until 10:35. The assistant branch manager, Marlene Doyle, ran a weekly compliance huddle in the back office every Wednesday from 11 Hos to 11:30. The third teller on staff, a part-timer named Jenna Holcomb, worked Monday through Thursday and was usually on a smoke break at the rear loading dock between 11:40 and 11:55. Tanisha did her work during those windows. She also adjusted the mailing cycles. Every 2 months, she would log into the back office mailing module under her senior teller credentials and push the next statement for a target account out by 10 to 14 days. Sometimes she suppressed a single monthly cycle altogether and then resumed it the following month, so that the statement when it arrived showed an unfamiliar balance with no explanation. Older customers, when faced with a confusing statement, did one of three things. They ignored it, they called the branch, or they brought it in person to talk to a teller they trusted. They brought it to Tanisha. When Mrs. Henley brought in her March statement and pointed to a balance she did not recognize, Tanisha walked her through it gently. She told Mrs. Henley that the statement had likely crossed in the mail with a recent transaction. She offered to print a current balance summary. She typed something into the terminal, smiled, turned the screen toward the customer, and reassured her. Mrs. Henley walked out of the branch that morning, thanking Tanisha by name. 9 days later, Tanisha withdrew another $600 from Mrs. Henley's account. The operation escalated slowly. By mid-2022, Tanisha was running unauthorized withdrawals 2 to 3 times per week against an active rotation of 9 different accounts. By late 2022, the rotation had expanded to 12 accounts. By spring 2023, it was 14. The money did not go into a flashy lifestyle. There was no luxury car. There were no designer handbags. There were no expensive vacations. Tanisha continued driving the 2015 Honda Civic. She continued paying $540 in rent. She continued sending her mother $200 a month. What there was instead was cash. Cash in the kitchen cabinet, in a coffee tin behind the flour. Cash in a shoebox at the top of her bedroom closet, behind a stack of folded sweaters. Cash in an envelope inside a hollowed-out paperback on her bookshelf. And cash in regular small deposits into a second checking account she had opened at a different bank, Northridge Federal Credit Union, in 2022. Across 18 months, she made 47 cash deposits into the Northridge account in amounts ranging from $200 to $900. Each deposit was just under the federal reporting threshold. The Northridge account balance, by the time of her arrest, was $26,400. The Hartwell Savings system did not see any of this. The Hartwell Savings system saw a senior teller with a perfect attendance record, a balanced drawer every single closing shift, and the highest customer satisfaction score on the branch's quarterly survey 3 years running. In early September 2023, Harland Midwest Bancorp's Internal Risk and Compliance Department in Columbus began its annual system-wide audit. The audit was routine. It ran every year. It was not triggered by any complaint, any tip, or any specific concern about the Crestfield branch. The audit's parameters were broad. It pulled 12 months of transaction data from every one of the company's 11 branches and ran them through a statistical anomaly engine that flagged outliers across roughly 30 different operational metrics. One of those metrics was the use of the customer-present verbal authorized verification code. The code was designed to be used rarely. The expected frequency, based on a 5-year baseline across all 11 branches, was 4 to 7 uses per teller per year. That was the average. That was the threshold the anomaly engine had been calibrated against. When the engine processed the Crestfield branch data on September 12, 2023, it flagged a single employee terminal. The terminal belonged to senior teller Tanisha R. Bowman. The flag indicated that her terminal had logged 74 uses of the verbal authorized code in the trailing 12-month window. 74 uses against a branch average of 4. The report landed in the inbox of a senior compliance analyst in Columbus named Dolores Henning on the morning of September 14th. Henning had been a bank examiner for 16 years. She had seen anomalous patterns before. She knew what they typically looked like. This one did not fit the typical patterns. It was not a single large transaction. It was not a sudden burst of activity tied to one weekend or one terminal session. It was a slow, sustained, methodical pattern stretched across 19 months. A pattern that suggested whoever was doing it knew exactly what the audit thresholds were and had been operating just inside them on purpose. Henning opened a preliminary file. She pulled the underlying transaction logs for all 74 flagged overrides. She pulled the timestamps. She cross-referenced them against the Crestfield branch's customer visit logs, the front counter sign-in sheet that the branch had kept, in paper form, since 2011, scanned weekly into a back-office archive. In 61 of the 74 flagged transactions, there was no corresponding customer visit recorded within a 30-minute window of the override. In 43 of those 61 cases, the account holder lived more than a 5-minute drive from the branch and had no recorded visit on the entire day of the transaction. Henning escalated the file to her supervisor. Her supervisor escalated it to Harland Midwest's chief compliance officer. The chief compliance officer authorized a full forensic review of the Crestfield branch on September 21, 2023. The forensic review pulled 45 days of surveillance footage from the branch's lobby camera, every frame that had not yet been overwritten, and assigned 3 analysts to scrub it against the flagged transactions. Within a single 10-hour shift, the analysts had matched 14 flagged transactions to footage that showed Tanisha Bowman at her terminal, alone at the counter, processing withdrawals with no customer in front of her. The footage was unambiguous. There was no customer at the second window. There was no customer in the lobby. There was no other teller within visual range. There was only Tanisha, at her terminal, counting bills, slipping them into the small zippered pocket of her purse beneath the counter. On September 28th, Harland Midwest's chief compliance officer signed the formal referral letter to the Crestfield Police Department Financial Crimes Unit. The Financial Crimes Unit assigned the case to Detective Royce Vandermeer, a 14-year veteran of the department who had spent the last 6 years specializing in elder financial exploitation cases. He read the Harland Midwest referral letter on the morning of October 2, 2023, and within 48 hours had a written statement from Dolores Henning, copies of the flagged transaction logs, the customer visit log mismatches, and the surveillance footage matched to 14 specific transactions. He also had something else. He had a list of 14 victim names. Detective Vandermeer began the victim interviews on October 4th, starting with R.H., the 81-year-old widow on Greenfield Road, the first account Tanisha had hit. R.H. invited the detective in, made him a cup of instant coffee, and listened quietly while he laid the transaction printouts on her kitchen table. She did not recognize any of the withdrawals. She had not, she said, been to the bank on any of those dates. She had not, she said, authorized any of those amounts. She asked the detective how much had been taken from her account, in total. When he told her, $17,600, she put her hand on the table and did not say anything for a long moment. Then she asked him whether any of that money could be returned. Vandermeer told her honestly that he did not know. He spent the next 10 days interviewing the other 13 victims. The stories were variations on the same one. C.B., age 78, lost $11,400 and only discovered it when a daughter visiting from Indianapolis pulled up the account during an unrelated review. Mr. Carmichael, age 83, lost $6,200 and had been telling his son for 6 months that his statements didn't look right, but had been too embarrassed to push the issue. The Hudson sisters, who lived together and had a joint account, lost $4,800 combined and had no idea anything was missing. They assumed the lower balance was due to their property tax payment running through. On October 11th, Detective Vandermeer applied for a search warrant for Tanisha Bowman's apartment at the Maplewood complex. The warrant was signed that afternoon. The search began at 6:42 the next morning. Inside the kitchen cabinet, behind a 1-pound bag of all-purpose flour, officers recovered a metal coffee tin containing $6,100 in cash, sorted by denomination, banded with rubber bands, organized with the same meticulous care she had brought to every drawer balance at Hartwell Savings. Inside the bedroom closet, behind a stack of folded sweaters on the top shelf, officers recovered a spiral-bound college-ruled notebook. The notebook had a soft blue cover. The first page was dated February 12, 2022, the date of the first unauthorized transaction against R.H. Every page after that contained 3 columns: an account number, a dollar amount, a date. 38 entries. Every single one matched a transaction Harland Midwest's auditors had already flagged. She had been keeping her own ledger. Detective Vandermeer and 2 uniformed officers from the Crestfield Police Department drove to the Dunmore Avenue branch of Hartwell Savings on the morning of October 13, 2023, at 9:14 a.m., 26 minutes before opening. The branch manager, Eldon Ricks, met them at the side employee entrance and unlocked the door. Tanisha Bowman was already inside. She arrived for her shifts 20 minutes early every morning. She was, that morning, standing at the second teller window, counting the opening drawer. Detective Vandermeer walked through the lobby and stopped on the customer side of the counter. The 2 uniformed officers stayed near the front entrance. Vandermeer spoke first. "Tanisha Bowman?" "Yes." "I'm Detective Vandermeer with the Crestfield Police Department, Financial Crimes Unit. I need you to step out from behind the counter." She did not move for a moment. She looked at the stack of 20s in her hand. She set them carefully back into the drawer. She closed the drawer. She turned the key. Then she walked out from behind the counter and stood in the small space between the teller line and the customer counter. "We executed a search warrant at your residence yesterday morning. We recovered $6,100 in cash and a notebook. I think you know what notebook I'm talking about." She did not answer. "Do you want to talk to me about the notebook?" She shook her head very slowly. One time, side to side. "Tanisha, I'm placing you under arrest for theft, telecommunications fraud, and tampering with records. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you. Do you understand these rights as I have read them to you?" "Yes." "Do you want to make any statement at this time?" She looked past him, at the front glass doors, at the empty parking lot, at the small sign on the door listing the branch's lobby hours. "I want a lawyer." Those were the last words she spoke to Detective Vandermeer. One of the uniformed officers approached with handcuffs. Eldon Ricks, standing in the doorway of his office, did not say anything at all. Patricia Ellis, the woman who had trained Tanisha 13 years earlier and who had arrived 2 minutes before the officers, turned her back to the counter and walked into the break room and closed the door behind her. Tanisha Bowman was escorted out the side employee entrance into the back seat of an unmarked Crestfield police vehicle at 9:31 a.m. The branch opened to customers at 9:40, as scheduled, with one teller window dark. "We're heading into the courtroom now. Before we do, leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and consider subscribing. We cover cases that mainstream media ignores. The verdict on this one, when it lands, is going to matter to 14 people who deserved better." Tanisha Renée Bowman was booked into the Harlan County Jail at 10:14 a.m. on October 13, 2023. She was processed, photographed, fingerprinted, and held overnight pending arraignment. The formal charging document, filed in Crestfield Municipal Court on October 16th by Harland County Assistant Prosecutor Daniel Strauss, listed 16 counts. 14 counts of theft under Ohio Revised Code, Section 2913. 02A. 2. 1 count for each of the 14 victim accounts. 1 count of telecommunications fraud under Ohio Revised Code Section 2913. Therefore 5. Covering the falsified electronic verification entries. 1 count of tampering with records under Ohio Revised Code, Section 2913. 42. Covering the manipulation of the mailing cycle module. Arraignment took place on October 17, 2023, in Harland County Common Pleas Court before Judge Marvin H. Aldridge. Tanisha appeared in a green jail jumpsuit, hands cuffed in front, hair pulled into a low ponytail. Her court-appointed attorney, a public defender named Camille Reston, stood beside her at the defense table. The judge read the charges. Tanisha listened. Her shoulders did not move. When Judge Aldridge asked for her plea, Camille Reston answered for her. Not guilty. The prosecution argued for a $50,000 bond, citing the strength of the evidence, the cash recovered from her apartment, the secondary account at Northridge Federal Credit Union containing $26,400 in unexplained deposits, and the fact that the defendant had no children, no significant family obligations in Ohio, and a potential flight risk profile. The defense argued for own recognizance release, citing Tanisha's lifelong residence in Crestfield, her continuous employment history, her clean criminal record, and her aging mother and grandmother who both relied on her partial financial support. Judge Aldridge set bond at $50,000, cash or surety. The bond was not posted. Tanisha was remanded to the custody of the Harland County Sheriff and transferred back to the county jail to await trial. The victim impact statements began arriving with the prosecutor's office within the first 2 weeks. R.H. did not appear in person, but submitted a 1-page handwritten letter that Assistant Prosecutor Strauss read into the record at a subsequent bond review hearing. The letter said, in part, that she had trusted Hartwell Savings with her late husband's pension for 31 years, that she had asked for Tanisha by name every time she came into the branch, that she had brought her a small jar of homemade strawberry jam from her own garden every June for the last 8 years, and that she did not understand how the same young woman who had carried her grocery bags out to her car on a rainy afternoon in 2019 could have done what the prosecutor said she had done. The letter ended with 1 sentence. I would like to know why. There was no answer in the file. C.B., the 78-year-old who had lost $11,400, submitted a statement through her daughter. The statement was shorter and more direct. It said that C.B. had been moved into her daughter's home in Indianapolis after the discovery, that she no longer felt safe living alone, that she had stopped sleeping through the night, and that the money lost represented every dollar she had set aside for her own funeral and burial expenses over the previous 15 years. As of this recording, the case against Tanisha Renée Bowman remains pending. A pre-trial hearing has been scheduled. The defense has filed a motion to suppress the contents of the spiral notebook on the grounds that the search warrant did not specifically enumerate handwritten records, a motion that the prosecution has called meritless and that legal observers expect Judge Aldridge to deny. A formal trial date has not yet been set, but Assistant Prosecutor Strauss has indicated publicly that the state intends to pursue every count and is preparing to call all 14 victims, the Harland Midwest Compliance Team, Detective Vandermeer, and the 3 forensic analysts who matched the surveillance footage to the flagged transactions. Under Ohio Revised Code, Section 2913. 02A. 2. Each theft count involving an elderly victim and an amount exceeding $1,000 is a felony of the 3rd degree, carrying a sentencing range of 9 to 36 months per count. The telecommunications fraud and tampering counts each carry independent felony exposure. If convicted on all 16 counts and sentenced consecutively, Tanisha Bowman faces a maximum exposure of more than 40 years in an Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction facility. Her mother, Deborah Bowman, has not visited her in the county jail. According to the visitation logs, only one person has, her grandmother, who made the 40-minute drive from Pinehurst in early November, with a church friend behind the wheel. The spiral notebook now sits in a sealed evidence envelope in the Harland County Prosecutor's Office. The cash from the kitchen cabinet has been deposited into a court-supervised restitution account, along with the contents of the Northridge Federal Credit Union account, which was frozen pursuant to court order. Combined, the recovered funds total roughly $32,500, about 35 cents on every dollar Tanisha Bowman took. The remaining $61,700 is unaccounted for. R.H. The 81-year-old widow on Greenfield Road still drives herself to the Hartwell Savings branch on Dunmore Avenue every other Tuesday morning. She does not approach the second teller window anymore. She asks for the new senior teller, a young man named Devin, who knows her by name now and who carries her grocery bags out to her car on rainy afternoons. She has not received any restitution. She has not been told whether she ever will. This case was quiet, no screaming, no high-speed chase, no headline arrest, just one polo shirt, 1 second window, one notebook, and 14 people who walked into a bank one Tuesday morning and trusted the wrong face behind the counter. But the case on the right-hand side is louder, faster, and ends in a way no one in that courtroom saw coming. Click it now.